Welcome back to Horror Town. Today, we have two extreme and scary podcast horror stories that you won't want to listen to alone. So get ready to be terrified like never before. Let's begin. It was a hot summer day when Sarah, a successful podcaster, decided to interview a mysterious guest for her show. His name was Max, and he claimed to have experienced something truly terrifying that he wanted to share with the world. As they started the interview, Max recounted how he had stumbled upon an old tape recorder at a yard sale. The recorder had a label that read "Listen if you dare," and Max, being the curious person he was, couldn't resist. He pressed play, and what he heard sent shivers down his spine. The tape was filled with strange whispers and eerie sounds that seemed to be coming from beyond the grave. Max couldn't make out what the voices were saying, but he knew that they were not of this world. As the interview went on, Sarah started to feel a sense of unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Max and his story, but she pushed those thoughts aside and continued to listen. Suddenly, the lights in the studio flickered and the equipment started to malfunction. Sarah tried to calm Max down, but he seemed to be in a trance, muttering something under his breath. Just as Sarah was about to end the interview, Max's eyes rolled back into his head, and he started convulsing. Sarah panicked and called for help, but by the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. Max was dead. Sarah was left with a feeling of dread and a haunting suspicion that the tape recorder was the cause of Max's death. She decided to investigate further, and what she discovered was beyond her worst nightmares. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something sinister about the tape recorder Max had found. She did some digging and discovered that it was once owned by a man named Robert, who had a reputation for dabbling in the occult. According to local legend, Robert had used the recorder to capture the voices of the dead and communicate with spirits from beyond the grave. He had been rumored to have summoned a demon and made a deal with it, trading his soul for wealth and power. Sarah's investigation led her to a dilapidated old mansion on the outskirts of town, where Robert had once lived. It was said that he had died in the house, and his spirit still haunted the place. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she stepped inside the mansion. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. As she made her way deeper into the house, Sarah felt a sense of unease growing within her. She knew that she was getting closer to the source of the malevolent energy that seemed to be permeating the place. Finally, she came to a room at the end of a long hallway. It was filled with all manner of occult artifacts, books, candles, and strange instruments she couldn't begin to identify. And in the center of the room was the tape recorder, sitting on a pedestal like a sacred object. Sarah felt a sense of dread wash over her as she approached the recorder. She hesitated, unsure if she should touch it, but something compelled her to do so, and she reached out and pressed play. What she heard was unlike anything she had ever heard before. The voices were clearer now, their whispers growing louder and more urgent, and mixed in with the voices was a low, guttural growling that made her blood run cold. Suddenly, Sarah felt a presence behind her. She turned around to see a dark figure looming in the shadows. It was Robert's ghost, and he was furious that someone had disturbed his sacred artifact. With a howl of rage, Robert lunged at Sarah, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly energy. She tried to run, but he was too fast, and his grip was like iron. Sarah struggled against Robert's grasp, but he was too strong. She could feel his icy grip tightening around her neck, and she knew that she was running out of time. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the room, and Sarah heard a voice calling out to her. It was Max's voice, and it was coming from the tape recorder. Max's voice grew louder and more insistent, drowning out Robert's ghostly screams. And as the light grew brighter, Sarah felt Robert's grip loosening. With a final burst of strength, Sarah wrenched herself free and ran towards the light. As she stepped into the glow, she felt a sense of peace wash over her, and the weight of the past lifted from her shoulders. When she emerged, she found herself back in the studio, the tape recorder lying on the table in front of her. But something had changed. The malevolent energy that had once surrounded it was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. Sarah knew that she had been given a second chance. She had come face to face with the darkness and emerged on the other side, stronger and wiser for the experience. As she looked back on the events that had transpired, she knew that she had to share her story with the world. And so, she recorded a special episode of her podcast, telling the tale of the haunted tape recorder and the dark forces that had once surrounded it. Her listeners were captivated by the story, and it quickly became one of the most popular episodes of her show. And though some dismissed it as a work of fiction, others knew the truth that sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are all too real. Katie was a podcaster who specialized in telling true crime stories. She had gained a large following over the years and had become known for her ability to delve deep into the minds of killers and uncover the truth behind their heinous crimes. One day, Katie received an email from a man who claimed to be a former serial killer. He said that he had been released from prison after serving his time and wanted to share his story with the world. Katie was skeptical at first. She had received countless emails from people claiming to have insider knowledge of unsolved crimes or to have witnessed something supernatural. But there was something about this man's message that made her think he might be telling the truth. After some back and forth, Katie agreed to meet the man for an interview. He insisted on meeting in a secluded location, far from prying eyes, and Katie agreed. When she arrived at the meeting place, she found the man waiting for her. He was tall and thin, with a wild look in his eyes. Katie felt a chill run down her spine as she sat down to begin the interview. As they started talking, the man recounted the gruesome details of his crimes. He spoke in a calm, detached voice, as if he were describing the weather. But Katie could sense a darkness lurking beneath the surface, and she felt herself becoming more and more uneasy as the interview went on. Suddenly, the man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a knife. He lunged at Katie, his eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity. Katie's instincts kicked in, and she jumped out of her chair, narrowly avoiding the man's knife. She backed away, trying to put some distance between herself and her attacker. The man laughed, his voice cold and calculating. He told Katie that he had been planning this for a long time, that he had lured her there with the intention of killing her and making her his final victim. Katie felt a wave of terror wash over her as she realized the gravity of the situation. She knew that she had to think fast if she wanted to survive. She looked around the room, searching for something she could use as a weapon. But the man was too quick, and he kept coming at her with the knife. Katie's heart was pounding in her chest, and she could feel the sweat on her palms. She knew that she was running out of time. Suddenly, an idea came to her. She remembered that she had her phone in her pocket, and she knew that she could use it to call for help. As the man lunged at her again, Katie pulled out her phone and dialed 911. She shouted her location into the phone, hoping that someone would hear her and send help. To her relief, she heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The man hesitated for a moment, and that was all the time Katie needed. She lunged at the man, grabbing his knife hand and twisting it until the weapon fell to the ground. Then, she landed a punch to his face, knocking him to the ground. Just as she was about to make a run for it, the man grabbed her ankle, causing her to stumble. She fell to the ground, and the man straddled her, his hands tightening around her throat. Katie felt the air leaving her lungs, and she knew that she was in serious trouble. But just when she thought it was all over, the police burst through the door, guns drawn. The man was apprehended, and Katie was rushed to the hospital. She was shaken, but alive. As she lay in her hospital bed, Katie couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if she hadn't thought to call for help. She knew that she had come dangerously close to becoming another statistic in the man's long list of victims. Katie's attack had shaken her to the core. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened and how close she had come to losing her life. But even as she tried to put the incident behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She started having nightmares, vivid dreams of the man coming back to finish what he had started. As the weeks went by, Katie became increasingly anxious. She felt like she was being watched, like someone was always lurking in the shadows. One day, she received an anonymous message on her podcast's website. It was a link to a video, and the subject line simply read, "You're not safe." Katie hesitated for a moment, then clicked on the link. What she saw made her blood run cold. The video was a recording of her attack. It had been filmed by the man, who had apparently set up a hidden camera in the room. Katie felt sick to her stomach as she watched the man taunt her, holding the knife to her throat. She could see the terror in her own eyes, and she felt like she was reliving the attack all over again. But as she continued to watch, something caught her eye. In the background of the video, she saw something moving. It was a shadow, flickering across the wall. Katie rewound the video and played it again, her eyes fixed on the shadow. And then she saw it, the outline of a figure standing just out of frame. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Had the man had an accomplice? Had someone else been there, watching the attack unfold? Katie started investigating, trying to track down any leads that might shed light on the mystery figure. She dug through police reports, spoke to witnesses, and even hired a private investigator. But no matter how hard she looked, she couldn't find any evidence of the mystery figure. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. As the months went by, Katie's anxiety started to ebb. The nightmares stopped, and she was able to put the attack behind her. But she never forgot about the mystery figure. It haunted her like a ghostly presence in the back of her mind. And then, one day, she received another anonymous message. It was a photo, taken from behind, of a figure standing in the shadows. And in that moment, Katie knew the figure was still out there, watching and waiting. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the darkest depths of horror. If you enjoyed these two extreme podcast horror stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And if you know someone who loves a good scare, be sure to share this video with them. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of Horror Town.